I'm Jim Kiggins. I'm the CEO at inciteVR. And Era, if you'd like to introduce yourself and Lori, then I'll introduce the inciteVR team.
Hi, I'm Era Sunbaum, and I'm the instructional technologist at North Carolina Wesleyan College and a student with Laurie at Sam Houston State University. We are going.
Era, you broke up a little bit. So I think the part that we missed was that yourself and Lori are working on your doctoral programs at Sam Houston State University.
That's right. In instructional systems design and technology. And we're hopefully almost done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me back up a little bit. So some slides that I was talking about that I did not share, which you
so excited about it.
which you have access to. There, it's linked in the Moodle. Going back to the learner's experience being the core focus of our work in this course, and that for immersive learning, we are defining that as virtual reality supported by artificial intelligence. And the artificial intelligence that we're talking about specifically is a combination of natural language processing, expert systems, and machine learning. And in the virtual reality camp, we're not going to be talking about mixed reality or augmented reality because immersion in those is different, not as deep as it is in virtual reality. And we'll be talking about why that is. And then, caught myself up here, the kinds of VR that we'll be specifically talking about is desktop VR and mobile VR and web XR. And in this case, mostly Oculus products. Thank you for letting me know, Era. So the artificial intelligence issue is one that is emerging in, especially now in higher education. It's become an IT domain, unfortunately. So one of the things that's happening is that in higher ed, you'll see that IT is starting to onboard bots and other low-level applications, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about using in our case, we use the Google Cloud AI suite. It could be Amazon, it could be IBM. There's a number of different packages. We use Google because of the accessibility. So we're going to be sharing with you some solutions that we have taken to the classroom that were created with and supported by the Google AI suite. And I think that it's very, very user-friendly. It's something that anybody with any interest at all, even in casual interest, can get started in making their own tutor using natural language processing. And even the Google ML package for machine learning is something that is accessible to a first-time user through their different applications where they have sites that are devoted to providing these resources for people that don't do this for a living every day. So we divide this into, and when we're talking about and previewing Google AI, and by the way, I'm going very quickly through these slides. This is going to be a preview of the content of the entire course. We'll be going into each of these in depth as we go through the following modules. We divide Google AI conceptually into two different kinds of applications. One is an intelligent tutor, so that you can speak to a non-player character and that non-player character can speak back to you. And then intelligent content. And the intelligent content is being able to provide the learner with individualized, tailored content based on their skills gaps. So we have some products that we'll share with you that we've done that use these, so you can experience those, as well as some other products that we are familiar with that we didn't build ourselves that we think are exemplars. So in an ideal world, downhill with a tailwind, How we would see AI playing a role in immersive learning is that we would no longer be organizing instruction in courses, organized in degree programs, delivered in 16 or 8-week semesters with a set number of specific single learning objectives in individual courses. Instead, if we were truly going to focus, the Lexus was on the learner's needs, the entire body of learning would be organized in a taxonomy of skills. So this competency-based taxonomy then would be known to the machine learning, and then the intelligent tutor, the coach, would be essentially a ride-along instructor with the learner, and that learner and his or her coach would be able to speak to each other, and that NPC instructor would be able to constantly focus the learner on skills gaps so that the learner would be working on what they need to learn versus working on a specific calendar of content that they were going to have to absorb. So here is the premise, and there is a point now where we've kind of tipped the balance that we can say this is a fact. Learners acquire skills more rapidly with greater accuracy and retain learned skills longer if that learning experience happens in VR than any other methodology, including face-to-face, all other things being equal. So that's a pretty strong statement. We have a fair amount of research that we'll share with you that bears this out, and we'll also be able to take a look at why that happens. And that starts with a pedagogical shift, a change in thinking about how the learning is designed. So we have this methodology that we've developed, and it's depicted here in the ILXP pyramid. So that's a immersive learning experience design model. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend an entire module next week on this. We're going to look at how we take the typical kinds of instructional design approaches that we would use, which we call the intention, the foundation. We're still doing that. So we're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater here. We're not saying that what we used to do in legacy instructional design is not important. We're still doing design thinking, instructional design, inclusive design. We're still leveraging learning science. We're employing the best of game-based learning, machine learning, and analytics. We're still doing all of that to whatever degree a particular product is needing. But we're doing it with a different intention. And that is, we have some things that we know that VR is going to present for us, some capacities, and we want to be able to take the maximum advantage of that. So we're going to be looking at how immersion happens and what we can do to both improve it initially and to sustain it over the long run. Why feeling is important in terms of being able to get the most out of immersive learning. And then lastly, learner as creator, about learning and sharing as our highest cognitive level that we're going to be able to achieve in immersive learning. So there are lots of, this is a 3-year-old chart now. There are lots of elements that are involved in the process of designing and developing and deploying and supporting immersive learning. So this was our inaugural effort, and we would certainly change this now, and perhaps during this course all of you will have some suggestions about that. We have an empathy engine that we're going to go over how we use this, how this works, and it's a replicable systemic way to approach leveraging empathy and why it happens, how it happens, and how we can take the most advantage of that. Learning objectives, something that everyone loves. One of the things that we're looking at is changing the learning objective model a little bit, and some things that we see as an obstacle in a traditional learning objective is that typically, in almost every institutional setting, you have one learning objective that is supposed to fit all learners. So everyone's supposed to have a prerequisite skill, typically, to be in the course, and based upon the fact that they have that prerequisite skill, they're going to have learning objectives that are organized by the learner, the behavior, the condition, and the degree of mastery. So we're taking a slightly different approach, and we're suggesting that this could better be effective in terms of assessment of learning if they were tiered, because we have learners that are novice to immersive learning, learners that have some familiarity, and then we have full-on expert learners. And the expectation for their assessment should be different, and we design toward that differently. And one of the things that we do is we include a new component, which is the ILXD state. What is the state of immersive learning that we expect that learner to be in based upon their tier, and how are we going to assess that? And that, I think, is a very interesting part of the discussion right now globally among everyone in training and education about using immersive learning, is those different techniques for assessment. Shifting gears from the pedagogy, then we're going to look at the nuts and bolts of deployment and supporting products, immersive learning products. And we'll share with you the designs that we have and things that have evolved over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of taking VR into the classroom. And there were some things that now seem intuitively obvious, but were quite an epiphany for us when we first got started. One of them is, you walk into a classroom, we have a product that was being used in a microbiology course, and it was delivered on the Go headset, and 30 learners in the lab are using the the VR microscope, and they all have headsets on, and once they have headsets on, what are they doing? So we didn't have a way for the faculty or support staff to be able to see what the individual students were doing, and the only way that the students could communicate with us would be to take off the headset to communicate what their issues were, which of course totally broke the immersion that we were trying to sustain to begin with. So one of the things that we developed is a way to be able to see what the learners are doing and communicate with them while they're in VR. That's just one example of many dozens examples that were learned the hard way as we first started deploying VR in the classroom. And now we have a back end, we have a console, an enterprise system that supports those kinds of features, as well as artificial intelligence and lab builders and patient builders and scenario builders, all different kinds of analytics, the different ways that we have connectivity between the devices and the back end and the learning management system, all of which are equally important in terms of being able to deploy something that's usable in higher education or training. So ILXP, which is our Immersive Learning Experience Production model, is a system of models. So it's a large collection of models that we have assembled. Some we've created, some we have sourced. One that we've recently sourced that we like a lot is from Kitware. It's a physiology engine. And what this allows us to do is, this physiology engine allows us to take a set of medical parameters and imbue them on a non-player character. So we can say this non-player character is a 46-year-old black male that's diabetic, 6'1", weighs 255 pounds. Put all those parameters into the engine, and then we can tell the pulse physiology engine, okay, we just intubated this patient. And then based on that, the display is going to show what the display would show if it was actually happening in a hospital medical clinic without us having to write that code ourselves. And there are many engines of this type that are available, so we're going to be looking at how we can source these different kinds of products that are available in the market to improve the quality of our products that we're using in the classroom. The functionality of the dashboard, I think, is pretty important. So we're going to talk about, in the deployment part of this course, we're going to talk about what does it take to give faculty what they need in terms of the tools to be able to successfully train for and then deploy and sustain and support VR products in the classroom, and be able to take advantage of all the features that are being provided by the system along the way. So we have opportunities for insights and analytics that do not exist in any other way. And an example is one of the things we could do with virtual reality is we could eye track. We could tell, what did the learner look at all times? So as an example, that's something that would be pretty hard to do in any other setting, and something that, because we have them in their headset, we're able to do that. By the end of this course, I hope that these statements are going to be meaningful for you as you're thinking about ways that you're going to be possibly using immersive learning in your courses. So we're obsessed with reducing friction, and it's because one of the big barriers is just getting started. It's such a challenge to just get started. Once you get over that initial hurdle of learners being situated and comfortable in VR, it takes off on its own. It's that initial friction that we're concerned about, and we have learned a lot of techniques that we're going to share with you for reducing that friction. Something that we can also share with you that is another thing that would seem intuitively obvious is that the most important consideration for using artificial intelligence as part of a product is accuracy and trust. So we had a early playtesting product that we used that because of low filtering for the artificial intelligence model, the accuracy wasn't there. So you could talk to your tutor and you could get great accurate information, and then you could turn around and ask it, what's the capital of Illinois, and it would tell you Honolulu. And it's all about leveraging the tool to produce the kind of accuracy that you need to have, and then having the time to be able to make sure that you have play tested that enough and iterated on that enough that you have the accuracy level that you need, and the trust that the learner has, because they have to be able to trust that what the AI is telling them is so. Something also related that we've learned is that conversational quality is way more important than anything else. So you can have an artificial intelligence character, a bot, an NPC, and you can have the highest fidelity in the world in terms of the quality, visual quality of the character. And if the conversation quality is poor, then that character is not believable. Conversely, you can have a stick figure, but if you have insanely great conversation, then learners have no problem with suspension of disbelief, and they can deal with that character as if it was alive in their experience. And then individualized learning is really a big factor in VR. Agency, lexus of control, is the most important factor, and subject to that, making meaningful decisions and being in charge of their own learning is vitally important. Something that breaks the immersion, disrupts the flow very quickly, is when the learner feels like they're not in charge of what it is that they're going to do. So they don't understand why they have to do this, or this task is too simple for their skill level, whatever the things are. So being able to look at all of the different ways that the learning can be individualized is something that's going to be a key to success. We have places where we have created products where they did not exist before, and how we did that was by using example-driven data sets. And as you're looking at possibly creating or using off-the-shelf immersive learning in your discipline, that might be of interest to you, different ways that you can arrive at this data that you're going to use out of the system, where that came from in the real world in a very traditional way, to be able to drive your work and development. And then none of this works if you don't have a sufficient management system. So if you don't have a way to be able to customize the content to fit the needs of the learner and your particular course of instruction. If you don't have a way to have insight into what the learner's doing in terms of their progress, all of these things that the back-end cloud management system provides are vitally important to be able to make something more sustainable than just a one-off activity that you're going to do once or twice during the course that doesn't have any support. So there we go. That's a preview of the materials that we're going to be taking a look at over these modules in the course. Speaking of which, I'm looking at the Moodle. I'm sharing that on my screen. And right now, the first module, which is Foundation, is the module that is accessible beginning today through next Tuesday. And there are some activities that are listed for that module that are on the Foundation activities page. And we would ask you to start there by taking a look at what the activities are and get a sense of what for you to get a sense of what your interest is that most suits your need in the course. And then in the top section, the general section, there's a syllabus that Ira has created. We have a course highlights wiki where we're asking you to share resources that you uncover as you go, so this will be persistent through the course. We have a chat room that you can use if you want to have small group chat. There's a virtual cafe for things that have nothing to do with any one of the modules in particular, just a meeting place. The news forum is a forum that is required subscription. So any post that happens in the news forum goes out to everybody by email that's registered in the course. So in the module 1 Foundation, there's a discussion forum. And I'm just going to briefly go here. And in the upper right, there's a little gear symbol here. And you can subscribe to the forum. These are not mandatory subscriptions. So if you would like to, in any one of these forums, you can click on that gear symbol and you can subscribe to the forum, which means that every post that happens will come to you by email outside of the Moodle. You can also see when you look at this that there's a subscribe toggle. So if you want to, you can subscribe just for an individual thread that's happening in the discussion forum. And what we would like to do is we'd like to encourage everybody involved over the next few weeks to please don't hesitate to post, to share, to suggest. We're very eager to hear your thinking about the ILXP content in general, and also suggestions and thinking that you have about improving this course.